Welcome back, survivor. If you can hear this, it means you're still alive. This is Jack's Nightmares, and this is your next story. The stone floor pressed cold through my sleeping mat, and the silence above me wasn't the kind you get in cities, or even forests. It was the kind you only hear in places built before electricity. Sealed stone, no hum, no buzz, just the weight of history and air too still to stir dust. I hadn't meant to stay the night, but Rudy, the castle caretaker, had waved me toward a tucked-away maintenance room near Gate 7 and told me it'd be warmer than the hillside. He wasn't wrong. It felt like sleeping inside a vault. Morning came slow. The first light filtered down through a narrow slit window 30 feet overhead. That window was built for archers, not sunlight, but it did the job. I rolled over, pulled on my boots, and sat still for a while, watching my breath hang in the air. I didn't need an alarm. My internal clock was already in research mode. I'd been in Austria 6 days by then. The trip was part fieldwork, part pilgrimage. I'm not a historian by degree. At least, not anymore. But I've spent years in the Society for Creative Anachronism, and longer than that studying how fortresses were actually built to function when the enemy was real. Not tourists, not reenactors. Enemies with ladders and fire. Hochostowitz Castle was the perfect case study. 14 sequential gates, angled choke points, defensive bottlenecks designed not just to stop invaders, but to break them mentally before they got within bow range of the inner walls. I'd spent the last few days pacing every stone of the northern ascent, measuring everything from turn radius to field of fire visibility, documenting how each gate channeled movement, how the slope affected stamina. It wasn't just for fun. I was compiling a study. Notes, sketches, diagrams. The kind of thing I could eventually publish maybe, if anyone cared. I had 2 notebooks full, and another one half done. Western side was next on my list. Then Vienna, then home. Rudy had taken to calling me der Professor, but with a grin. Mid-40s, American, quiet. He said I was the first person in years to ask for schematics instead of brochures. We talked over lunch a few times. I didn't ask many questions about his job, and he didn't ask many about mine. That's how older men get along. Usually, silent cooperation. He trusted me enough to hand over a few service door keys and warned me not to wander near the southern cliffs after rain. Tourists fall, he said, even smart ones. The room he let me use last night wasn't on any official map. Concrete floor, bare walls, a rusted breaker panel bolted shut with wire. I laid my gear out on a canvas tarp and used my pack as a pillow. There was something comforting about being inside a medieval stronghold with no one else around. No hum of traffic, no glow under the doorframe, just stone, memory, and the kind of silence that makes you pay attention. I didn't know it then, but that was the last morning I'd wake up thinking this place was just history. That morning, I boiled coffee with a little butane burner beside my mat, reviewed my notes from the day before, and stepped out into the open courtyard above Gate 6. The sun was just beginning to spread across the valley. The view stretched far out toward Klagenfurt, a wide green sprawl broken by patches of fog and the sharp lines of rooftops. The mountains beyond were crisp and perfect. For a minute, I was just happy to be here. No meetings, no email, just stone and silence. I spent the morning focused on Gate 4. Not a glamorous spot by tourist standards, but essential to the flow of the castle's interior defense. I worked in silence, pacing off distances, photographing the hinge placement, checking angles of approach. Everything I logged might eventually feed into the article I was putting together for a historical journal back in the States. Maybe a talk at Penn or Columbia if I tightened the thesis. The idea was simple: how medieval layered defenses could inform modern-day crowd control strategies, riot planning, evacuation architecture, that sort of thing. Nobody reads this stuff outside our niche, but it matters to me. Around midday, I stopped to eat in the small stone cafe nestled above the 5th switchback. They served decent bread, cured meat, local cheese. Tourists were light that day, midweek, off-season, but a few families passed by, most of them just looking for the Dracula Tower they'd seen on brochures. I sat outside, watching the valley through the stone parapets, chewing slowly, when my phone buzzed on the table. The screen showed a strange banner, Regional Emergency Alert, Biohazard Incident near Klagenfurt, Shelter in place, await instructions. I stared at it for a few seconds. No sound played, just the text. Yellow border, official crest. Rudy wandered by a few minutes later, saw the alert, and didn't seem fazed. Probably a gas leak, he said, shrugging. Maybe a derailed freight truck. It happens. They'll clear it up. Then he went back down the stairs like nothing had changed. I didn't panic. I screenshotted the alert, saved it locally, then tried refreshing the local news app. It timed out. My email client failed to sync. Texts were taking longer and longer to go through. I tried calling home, but all I got was a dead ringtone. One message from a friend back in the US squeaked through. "What's going on over there?" But nothing else. I figured it was a network saturation thing. If it really was a chemical spill, everyone would be blowing up the lines. The rest of the afternoon passed quietly. I worked alone, finished my measurements for Gate 4, made voice memos, snapped sketches into my notebook. I recorded one short clip for myself. If you needed to hole up somewhere medieval and secure in a no-electricity scenario, this is it. You could stop an army here with 5 trained people and a few shovels of gravel. Not joking. The geometry does most of the work for you. I didn't know then that I'd be testing that theory for real. I thought I was being cute, making a YouTube joke for no one but myself. I stayed on site again that evening. With no tourists left and no new word from the city, it felt safer to remain where I had visibility. I moved back into the little side room by Gate 7, locked the iron bolt from the inside, and rolled out my mat. I had power packs for my phone, a flashlight, a full bottle of water, and enough supplies for 2 days if things stayed weird. I figured trains would resume tomorrow. At worst, I'd have to hitch a ride into a nearby village. After sunset, I started hearing helicopters again. Multiple, not on patrol patterns. These were fast, low, coming from the west. Later, the sirens started. At first, I thought they were echoes or wind. This place plays tricks with sound. But the longer they went, the more I realized it wasn't the castle. Something in the valley was wrong. I couldn't see much, but I kept hearing a staccato drone of distant engines, and something like screaming. Not close, not constant, but enough to make me sit up and listen longer than I should have. I turned the flashlight off early and lay still for over an hour, just listening. No footsteps, no chatter, no official update, just wind curling through the cracks in the stone. At one point, I sat up and jotted in my notebook, network down, roads may be closed, assume shelter in place is serious, recheck outer gates, take inventory tomorrow. I didn't think the world was ending. I thought maybe something big had happened. A major contamination incident, a riot, maybe terrorism. Not this, never this. Still, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about how castles weren't just built for beauty. They were built to last through sieges, to survive long waits, to outthink a force 10 times larger than yours. I remembered that joke I'd made earlier about proof of concept. It didn't feel like a joke anymore. Eventually, I curled back into the mat and stared up at the arched ceiling above me. The stone was rough-cut and old. Centuries of hands had worked and reworked this place, waiting for threats that never came. Or maybe they did, and we just forgot. I thought about the gates again, the way the path curls and narrows, how visibility tightens at each level. I thought about the fact that I was already above the 7th gate, with supplies, a lockable door, and one hell of a view of everything below me. If this had been an ordinary trip, I would have packed up and headed down by mid-morning. There was a train to Vienna I'd planned to catch the next day, but that morning, something was wrong. The air didn't feel off, nothing dramatic like smoke or sirens, but there was a stillness on the hillside, like the mountain was holding its breath. I stayed in the courtyard above Gate 6 longer than usual, sipping what little coffee I had left, watching the valley with a tighter stare than before. By 8, I could see motion near the visitor lot. At first, just a few cars rolling in or out. Then the odd honk. Not the hello kind tourists used, but long ones. Sharp, urgent. Then a stall, and some kind of shouting. Too far to hear properly, then quiet again. My phone was no help. Signal was down to 1 bar, no data, no refresh. I tried calling my airline, then the embassy in Vienna. Nothing went through. SMS worked for a time. I sent a short message to my girlfriend. Still at the castle, things weird, staying put until I know more. But it hung on sending for nearly 5 minutes before disappearing into the void. I had no idea if it arrived. An hour later, the national emergency tone played again. This time with audio. A harsh buzz, then a flat official voice repeating the order in both German and English. Shelter in place, road closures active, civil protection forces overwhelmed. Do not travel. Do not approach hospitals or police stations unless instructed. I stood there in the courtyard while it played, watching a museum staff member hustle a group of nervous-looking tourists down the steep switchback road toward the lower gates. 2 guards were with them, unarmed, just carrying radios and trying to look calm, but their faces told a different story. The kind of blank focus you see in people trying not to show fear in front of strangers. The kind of walk you do when you're told not to run, even when you want to. A few minutes later, Rudy passed by. He was moving quick, keys jangling from his belt. He paused just long enough to say that they were closing up the visitor center, sealing the outer turnstile, and locking the main access road gates. If the roads reopen tomorrow, I'll come back, he said. If not, just stay above gate 7. You've got the high ground. Then, as casually as if handing off lunch, he tossed me a small ring of spare utility keys. Just in case, he said, and disappeared down the path. I watched him go, the ring heavy in my hand. 5 keys, 3 labeled, 2 not. It was a strange kind of trust. Or maybe just a final shrug from a man who didn't want to die in a tourist trap. Either way, I suddenly realized I wasn't a guest anymore. I was an occupant. I walked back toward my sleeping space but stopped near the old office past gate 8. The door was always closed, but not locked. I tested the keys. One of them fit. Inside was a small maintenance space, likely used by staff during events. There was a desk, 2 chairs, a mop sink, a wall-mounted first aid kit, a stack of bottled water under the table, and, most useful of all, a metal locker with a battery-powered lantern and some spare fuel canisters. No radio, no map, no firearms. This wasn't that kind of place, but it was solid, dry, and secure. I moved my gear in slowly, 1 trip at a time, kept my routines quiet. Even though I hadn't seen anything dangerous yet, there was a pressure building under my skin. The internet wasn't coming back. The news had stopped updating. Something was breaking down out there. I needed to be able to think without noise. I locked the door behind me and took inventory. 3 full liters of bottled water, 5 days' worth of snacks if rationed carefully, bread, dried sausage, a few apples, 2 packets of trail mix, and a half-dozen energy bars. I still had my burner, 1 full gas cartridge, and a spare. First aid kit was intact. Gauze, iodine, gloves, aspirin, triangle bandage. Enough to stop a cut, not a gunshot. The outer gate now had a visible chain and padlock from inside. I tested it. Solid. The castle itself was quiet, almost too quiet. No foot traffic, no more tourists, no voices echoing off the stone. The silence was making me jumpy. Every sound became too loud. The creak of old hinges, the flutter of pigeons nesting near the towers, the occasional clang of a chain swaying in the wind. I spent the next few hours checking the gates above and below me. Gate 8 still swung freely, no bolt. Gate 9 had an iron beam slot built into the interior arch. I dragged an old crate over and positioned a makeshift barricade, just enough to stall someone from rushing through. I figured if things really got bad, I'd retreat further up. Gate 10 had better visibility and a tighter kill zone. I hated that I was already using words like that in my head, but it helped me think clearly. Late afternoon, the sky turned grey. Not rain, just overcast. The wind picked up through the arrow slits. I sat inside the office, facing the door, and tried calling out again. First the police, then the embassy, then my airline. All failed. No signal, or error tones. Messages either hung or bounced. Even my offline maps were struggling. Cache data was spotty. I opened my saved news feeds. Most hadn't updated since early that morning. A few headlines flashed erratically before vanishing. Something about neurological symptoms, violent behavior, bite-related injuries. Then the feeds died completely. I ran a low-quality version of a local news video. The buffer struggled, but I caught a fragment, a paramedic speaking to camera with a cracked voice. "We don't know what this is. It's not rabies. It's faster than that. It gets in the brain in minutes. We're losing control." Then static. Then nothing. I closed the app and sat still for a while. There was no confirmation, no military statement, just scraps. And still, no one came back to the castle. I started sketching again. Not for the study this time, but for clarity. I drew a simple map of the gates above and below, marked positions I could seal quickly, noted which gates had good lines of sight, which had shelter, which had tools nearby. If things went on for more than a day or two, I'd need to establish a pattern, rotate sleeping spots, create fallback zones, leave escape options. Night came early. I didn't turn on the lantern until full dark. I covered the cracks around the door with a blanket so no light would spill. I ate a quarter of a sausage and half an apple, drank half a liter of water, logged my rations, wrote a short journal entry by hand. There was no howling, no screams, just wind and bells, automated ones that still rang hourly from the chapel tower out of habit. I listened to them like they were announcements in a ruined city. At some point, close to midnight, I heard something outside. Not close, not at the gate, but further down, a metallic clatter. Not the wind, something unnatural. I froze, light off, holding my breath without realizing. A minute passed, then two. I heard nothing else. I didn't sleep much that night. I just kept thinking about those news fragments. Bite transmission, aggression, overwhelmed hospitals, fast neurological onset, words that didn't line up with normal outbreaks, words that made you think about movies you pretended you never believed in. I wasn't scared yet, not in the way that makes people freeze or run, but something in my body had already accepted that I wasn't going home tomorrow. I was inside a fortress, above 14 gates, alone, and if that clatter was what I thought it might be, if the cities were truly falling, then maybe being up here wasn't the worst place in the world to be. At sunrise, I went up to the battlement above Gate 6. The air was dry and the sky clear, but smoke was already rising across the valley. Not the wide curtain of a forest fire. This was different. Pockets, pillars, sharp vertical columns in shades of brown and black. You learn to read smoke when you've seen enough reenactments and drills. This wasn't wood burning. This was something bigger. Tires, plastic, fuel. Far in the distance, I caught glimpses of movement. Not steady foot traffic or families hiking. These were fast, sporadic, clusters of people running along the service road that connects the visitor parking lot to the main path. I pulled out the binoculars I'd packed for castle detail work and scanned. That's when I saw the first real infected. I didn't understand what I was seeing at first. My brain tried to assign normal terms. Wounded man, drunk, maybe a stroke. But it didn't add up. The way his body jerked with each step, not like running, but like the weight of his limbs was confused about where to go. He stumbled forward at a diagonal, almost falling, then corrected violently and sprinted in a straight line towards someone I hadn't even noticed behind a parked car. The speed was unnatural. It was like a bad looped clip in a game animation, off by just enough to break the realism. I dropped the binoculars and backed away from the edge, swallowing dry and sharp. My stomach twisted and I hunched over the stone parapet. Bile hit the back of my throat before I could stop it. I didn't throw up, but it was close. My hands were shaking, and I forced them flat on the stone. "Healthy reaction," I said out loud. "Keep it. If you're not sick seeing that, you're not human." I reminded myself that this feeling, the churn in the gut, the sweat in your spine, it's not a weakness. It's a boundary, one I didn't plan to cross unless I had to. But I was no longer observing. I was now part of the scenario. I made the call to lock down properly. I couldn't keep pretending I'd be evacuated by the weekend. If help came, fine. If not, I had to assume that being in a fortified structure gave me an edge worth preserving. That meant discipline, planning, routine. The castle gave me topography, stone, and height. I had to give it focus in return. First came gate discipline. 14 gates was fantasy. No one could manage that alone. I took a pencil and marked off a defense line on the map I'd been sketching. Gate 10 would be the primary fallback. Gates 8 and 9 would be bolted and barricaded. That gave me 3 layers and enough vertical advantage to see an approach coming. I wouldn't try to hold the outer gates. That's how people die, stretching too thin, trying to protect what's already lost. Gate 10 was narrow and steep, defensible. I spent the morning quietly sealing the lower levels. I found a maintenance kit in one of the locked side rooms, a small toolbox with hand tools, a spool of thick fishing line, a roll of duct tape, nails, and some odds and ends. Not much, but enough to start. From the gift shop storage, I pulled 3 little brass souvenir bells, the kind you hang on keychains. I rigged tripwires along the switchback below Gate 9, fishing line tied taut across knee level, each linked to a bell fastened under an arch where wind wouldn't jingle them by accident. I marked each line with chalk on the wall so I wouldn't forget they were there. Next, I addressed the doors themselves. Gate 9 had an old steel latch I reinforced with a pine wedge, carved from one of the exhibit crates left near the armory display. I didn't have a proper saw, so I made rough cuts with a camping hatchet and shaped the ends against the stone stair like a crude rasp. No screws, nothing fancy, just friction and slot fit. I remembered how medieval doors worked, simple beam sockets carved into the stone. I mimicked the design with modern scrap. If I had to lock it fast, I could slide the beam in place in under 5 seconds. Pulling it out would take more time, but that was the point. I reserved Gate 10 for my serious fallback point. The top landing there had a natural choke where the walls narrowed. I mapped out final firing positions. Nothing armed, just markings with chalk where a polearm could thrust without hitting the arch. I didn't have real weapons, just a long wooden rod I'd been using for reenactment practice. It could keep distance, not kill, but maybe push something off balance if it came to that. By midday, I was sweating through my shirt. I took a break under the shade near Gate 10 and started organizing my food inventory properly. The cafe storeroom had been left mostly untouched, probably because the staff evacuated quickly. I found several crates of sealed snacks, pretzels, dried bread, vacuum packs of ham and cheese, some cooking oil, vinegar, and a small sack of flour. At the back of the pantry, I found a small burlap sack of potatoes stored cool and dry, starchy insurance if fuel held out. More bottled water too, at least 20 liters, enough to last weeks if I was careful. I relocated all perishables to the coldest chamber I could find, one of the old stone storage rooms deep in the keep where sun never reached. I tested it with my bare hand and breath. It held chill well. I marked the inside of the door with the date and a rotation schedule. The vinegar I stored separately, high up, just in case it spilled. I had no idea how long I'd be here, but organizing gave me control, and control was survival. Water was the next concern. Bottles wouldn't last forever. I needed a backup. I rigged a crude rain catch system using a tarp from the museum supplies and plastic tubs from the cleaning closet. The stair roof near Gate 11 had a good angle, so I gutted it with zip ties and duct tape, directing runoff into a basin below. I didn't know when the next rain would come, but when it did, I'd be ready. Boiling would still be necessary, but I had a portable burner and 2 spare butane cartridges from the cafe's catering drawer. That night, I drew up a ration chart. 1,500 calories a day maximum. No waste, no emotion. I weighed each item, calculated shelf life, and staggered consumption to keep energy levels stable without spikes. It felt mechanical, maybe cold, but the logic kept me from spiraling. Every decision had to serve the plan. I didn't hear the bells that night. The automated chimes from the chapel stopped. Maybe someone finally shut the system down. Maybe the power failed. The silence felt different, thicker. I sat near the slit window above Gate 10 and looked down the valley. The smoke was worse now. 5 or 6 distinct pillars, spaced like a broken picket fence. Wind carried the scent up the hillside. Not just burning. There was something else in it. Acrid, wet, a note of something unnatural. I pulled my scarf up over my nose and watched the road. More movement. This time, not a crowd. One figure. Alone. Moving slowly along the main access trail. Stumbling, pausing, then jerking forward again. It passed under a broken lamppost and tilted sideways, crashing into the guardrail before straightening and walking again. That same off-center movement I'd seen earlier, like a puppet missing strings. I didn't need binoculars to see that something was very wrong. It wasn't a survivor. It was something else. It stopped once, then turned as if it heard something I couldn't. It sprinted full force up the gravel for no reason I could see, then vanished behind a boulder. I didn't wait to find out where it went. I pulled back from the slit and returned to my barricade, checked the beam at Gate 10, reset the wedges, double-checked the bell wires. I didn't sleep that night. Not really. I leaned back against the cold stone with the burner off and the lights dimmed, staring at the door and listening for the bells, listening for anything. The weight of silence eventually collapses into a kind of noise. You hear the scratch of wind and mistake it for footsteps. You imagine breathing in the hallway. You count the seconds between bell chimes, even when you haven't rigged one to sound. Eventually your brain gets tired enough to lose the edge, but it never fully lets go. I must have nodded off sometime after 3. When I opened my eyes, grey light was creeping in through the slit windows. Nothing had moved. The bells were silent. No triggers. No footsteps. Just the wind, colder than before. I made coffee from boiled rainwater, not for the taste, which was sour and thin, but because routine mattered. I ate half a piece of dry bread and some cheese, logged my rations, and started the daily sweep of the lower defenses. Gate 9 held firm, wedges unmoved, tripwires tight, nothing on the stone. But by mid-morning, something changed. From the upper courtyard wall, I saw them. 4 figures making their way up the switchback below Gate 7. They weren't moving like a group. No conversation, no coordination. Just independent stumbling bodies pulled forward by some mindless instinct. One of them collapsed, rolled off the edge of the path, lay still for 5 seconds, then twitched and started crawling back toward the road. That's when I knew they weren't just stragglers or evacuees. I ducked behind the parapet and watched them carefully. They did not climb well. The steep incline of the stone path forced them to lurch and scrape. One of them used his hands like a toddler, slapping and dragging, fingers splayed and bleeding. I marked the spot with chalk where they struggled the most, just below the 3rd switchback. That would become important. Their gait was slow until something broke the air, a metallic clatter from the old sign near the closed ticket office. Just a gust of wind knocking it loose. But the sound changed everything. All 4 of them froze, tilted their heads, then sprinted toward the noise in perfect, terrifying synchronicity. The movement was fast but uncoordinated, joints overextending, torsos twisting too late to balance the speed, like they were puppets with severed strings being yanked forward by muscle memory alone. I stayed low, watched, took mental notes. These things weren't hunters. They were listeners. They followed sound, not sight, not smell. When there was no noise, they slowed. When a sound pierced the silence, they swarmed. I marked that down too. Back inside, I took stock of my makeshift weapons. I still refused to touch anything from the museum exhibits. That wasn't just principle, it was self-preservation. The museum pieces were sharp, but many were ornamental or brittle. If I broke one in a real fight, I'd have nothing. So I built my own. I took the old bill hook from the maintenance shed, designed for cutting brush, and duct-taped it onto the shaft of a long wooden shovel I'd found in the cleaning closet. The balance was off, but I wrapped the grip with paracord and foam until it felt stable in my hands. Then I file-honed the hook edge using a sharpening puck from my camp kit. It wouldn't cut like steel, but it would tear, and that was enough. I capped the point with a bit of rubber hose so I wouldn't stab myself moving through tight spaces. That came off only when needed. For backup, I kept a crowbar under my belt and a 2-pound drilling hammer tucked in my side pouch. Tools, not weapons. But they were real and heavy. I didn't like the feel of them, didn't like what it meant, but there was no fantasy left in this. If I waited until I was outnumbered, I'd be forced to use them without preparation. I'd rather be ready. Next came prepping the actual kill zone. I didn't want to kill anyone. I didn't want to kill anything. That's not who I am. But if those things made it past the gate, past the lines, I had to choose between stopping them or letting the fortress fall. I swept the landing just outside Gate 10, then dumped a bag of fine pea gravel over the last 5 stone steps, slippery enough to throw off balance, but manageable in proper boots. Then, I poured a small line of soap and water down the edge of the path, just enough to coat the stone without creating foam. A person could navigate it with care. Something charging blindly wouldn't stand a chance. I walked the route 3 times to memorize the grip spots, marked them with chalk crosses where my feet should land if I had to retreat quickly. I rehearsed every movement in silence. Raise the hook, step wide, brace with back foot, swing to redirect, not to crush. I didn't want skull contact. Too much mess. Too much emotional weight. They came at dusk. 1 at first, then 2 more behind. They didn't attack together. They drifted. Their heads twitched and pivoted with random spasms, as if the brain was still trying to process what ears were hearing and failing to understand it. They made no sound. That's what struck me most. No growling, no breath, just the scrape of flesh on stone and the subtle slap of misused feet. I crouched behind the door of Gate 10, gripping the shaft of the billhook so tight my palms ached. The lead-infected reached the slick part of the stair. Its footing gave way almost instantly. It went down hard, sliding forward on its side. The momentum carried it all the way to the base of the doorframe, where it spasmed once, then began pulling itself upright again. That's when the nausea hit. Full force, wet and hot in my throat. I staggered back behind the wall, dropped to a crouch, and vomited into the gravel. Not out of fear, not really, more like disgust, a deep body revulsion I couldn't fight. I wiped my mouth with the back of my hand and tried to slow my breathing, not because it calmed me, but because the bile was still burning in my throat and I couldn't afford to choke again. Then I stood. No more time. I didn't wait for it to rise fully. I jabbed the billhook low, hooking under its left foot and dragging backward. It fell again, flailing. I used the motion to pivot and push. Not strike. Just push. The blunt end of the pole met its shoulder, and I shoved with all the force I could muster. The body tumbled backward, bounced off the stone edge, and slid a dozen feet down the incline. Another was behind it now, closer, twitching hands and torn nails. I couldn't bring myself to aim for the head. Not yet. Instead, I swept low again, pulled at the knees. The balance broke, and I drove my shoulder into the gate frame as leverage. A shove, a fall, another tumble down the path. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't heroic, but it worked. The last one came faster. I tried the same tactic, but the angle was off. It clawed at the billhook and nearly pulled me off balance. I twisted, yanked backward, and slammed the shaft against its chest. Not a blow to kill, but to redirect. It slipped, slammed its skull into the edge of the stair with a crack that rang through the corridor like a dropped brick. It twitched once, then lay still. I didn't touch it again. I backed away, breathing hard, the pole still raised. The world was quiet except for the soft hiss of wind and the slow dribble of blood down the stone. I dropped the weapon against the wall and leaned there for several minutes, not thinking, not reacting, just standing. My hands shook, and I let them. Better to let the nerves burn out than try to suppress them. When I moved again, I fetched the long pruning hook I'd found earlier and used it to drag the bodies down the path, one at a time. I avoided looking at faces. It made everything worse. They weren't blank. They weren't empty. There was tension in them, something frozen mid-expression, like the person had been trying to scream when the change took them. I brought the corpses to a shaded outer terrace near a garden alcove. Somewhere the wind carried the smell away from my sleeping quarters. I laid each one down carefully, covered the heads with torn tarps, and placed rocks at the corners to keep the cloth in place. No prayers, no ritual, but I did pause, just for a moment, just long enough to feel the silence, to acknowledge it. Then I returned to the castle, changed gloves, washed my hands twice with vinegar, then twice again with soap. I changed shirts, scrubbed my arms, disinfected the hook with boiling water and let it dry in the sun. I didn't know what might transmit this thing. I didn't know if it was bloodborne, airborne, skin contact. So I treated it like it was all of them. Later that night, I made another voice log, calm, detailed. I described what I saw, their movements, the behavior, the speed, the response to sound. I noted their inability to navigate uneven terrain. I recorded that the nausea I felt was not a weakness, but protection. It stopped me from turning violence into routine. I wanted to remember that. When I stopped recording, I didn't say anything for a while. I just sat against the wall of Gate 10, looking at the poles I had sharpened, the hook I'd cleaned again and again, and the simple chalk lines on the ground. My arms ached from tension, not action, and still, there was more to do. That morning, I started building more permanent defenses. If I was going to hold this castle, I couldn't rely on improvisation forever. I needed systems, repeatable, simple, effective ones. I needed to think like a medieval engineer, not a panicked man in the hills. I began with the idea of a murder hole, not to kill, just to repel. There was an inner archway above Gate 10, framed with a flat beam across the top. The stone there couldn't be altered without proper tools, but I found 2 wood panels from shipping crates in the gift shop basement that could be hinged into a drop slot. I attached them above the lintel using tied leather strips and the last working brass hinge I could scavenge. It wasn't elegant, but it opened and shut like a flap. From there, I could pour water or dry sand safely from a bucket overhead onto whatever came through the gate without exposing myself. I'd considered boiling oil, but the fuel cost was too high. Same with hot water. The risk of burns if it splashed back was real. Hot sand, though, there was potential. It held heat, required little fuel, and didn't produce as much steam. I tested it that afternoon, heated a small pot of sand over the butane burner, then poured it through the drop slot onto a test patch of raw meat I'd left on the ground. It hissed and seared instantly, crude but effective. I wore gloves and eye protection. The sand spits when it hits damp surfaces, and it didn't feel like murder. That mattered. Next came the portcullis problem. There wasn't a real one at Gate 10, just the memory of it in the architecture. So I built something similar. I scavenged 3 slats from an old pallet, sanded them smooth with brick fragments, and ran them vertically between a pair of U-channel guides I built from bent exhibit rails. I lined the insides with felt cut from the bottom of rolled carpets to reduce noise. It worked. A rope looped around a wall cleat let me lift and drop the whole panel. When released, it fell fast and blocked the lower third of the gate, knee height, just enough to trip anything charging through, and from above, I could thrust the hook or spear down at anything trapped behind it. For open ground deterrence, I started laying caltrops. Nothing fancy, just nails bent through bottle cap bases, twisted and fixed in place with pliers. I set them in scattered clusters across the approach before sunset, marked the spots with white stones, and swept them up each morning. No chance I'd forget and step on one myself. That kind of mistake didn't get second chances. Noise was another problem. Every metal clink, every echo of a dropped tool, carried through the stone like it was calling something to me. So I padded everything. I tied strips of cloth around loose drawer handles, taped the spoons together so they wouldn't rattle, pulled the hinges tighter on the inner doors, and stuck felt pads under the beam sockets so the locking bars wouldn't clang when dropped. I moved like I was in a museum during a power outage. Quiet, deliberate, never too fast. That afternoon, I walked down toward the lower courtyard to check the car park, staying off the main path. There were still no signs of life, but I found 2 vehicles, civil service vans, both abandoned near the lower wall. I popped the hoods. One battery was flat, the other held charge. I hauled both back up the hill using a furniture dolly I'd reinforced with rope and wood braces. By evening, I had them wired in parallel with jump cables and a basic 12V inverter I'd taken from the maintenance garage. It wasn't much, but it powered low-draw LED strips I'd mounted above the gate corridors, ran a small USB fan for ventilation, and gave me enough juice to recharge my radio and phone for offline storage and occasional signal scans. I set a strict rule: generator only for 1 hour per night, no more. Diesel was finite, and I wouldn't waste it. I used the new power to recheck frequencies. The AM band was a mess. Static, broken announcements, the occasional burst of audio from German stations warning people not to approach towns or hospitals. No mention of the infected, just civil unrest, biohazard conditions, and vague terms like extreme behavioral danger. The silence told me more than the words did. With the work done, I started dinner, if you could call it that. Flatbread, thin and dry, made from flour, water and salt. I cooked it over a cast iron plate I'd repurposed from a lantern cover. No oil, just heat and patience. I made enough to last 2 days, let it cool, then wrapped it in cloth and stored it in a dry corner under the staircase. I ate 1 piece with vinegar and warm water, just enough to keep my stomach from gnawing itself. When the meal was over, I prepped for another sweep. This time, the terrace where I'd dragged the bodies. I had to check them again. I hated it, but I had to know if they stayed dead. My hands were steady, but my chest tightened every time I neared the tops. The smell hit first. Still sharp, still wrong. I rubbed old coffee grounds under my nose before I stepped closer. It helped. They hadn't moved. Not an inch. I checked for insects, flies, larvae. Nothing abnormal. No new blood. I used the hook to lift the tarp just enough to confirm posture. Still curled, still broken. The head of the one I'd pushed down the stairs had caved in from the impact. I lowered the cover, weighted it again, and stepped away. I doubled my hand washing when I got back. Night settled in early. Overcast skies, no moon. I didn't light anything outside the inner gate. I sat behind the portcullis panel, one hand on the rope lever, the other on the hook. I didn't feel fear so much as vigilance, the kind that drains your muscles without moving. You just sit, listen, track time by breathing, and shift your eyes to shadows that never move. Around midnight, I heard the distant ring of one of the bell wires. Not loud, just a delicate chime from far down the hill. I didn't react outwardly. I didn't grab for anything or make sudden moves. I just marked the sound and waited. After 10 minutes, there was nothing. No follow-up, no footsteps. Wind maybe, or an animal, but I wrote it down anyway. I've started marking each day's entries with a number now. Day 5, not as a countdown, more like a record. The kind historians would read 1,000 years from now if we ever rebuilt. That's what I keep telling myself. This matters. That helps more than I thought it would. I ended the day like I had the others. Ration check, water level, gate test, radio scan. Everything documented. Not because I enjoy it, but because the moment I stop keeping track is the moment I start to forget I'm still trying to live. Tomorrow I'll start reinforcing the north stairwell. There's an alternate access route through a visitor path that I haven't sealed yet. It's narrow, and the drop is steep. I might be able to collapse part of it with some leverage and a little luck. I'll need to be careful. One wrong move and I could strand myself above supplies I can't reach. I'm not sure if anyone else is left in the valley. No movement, no headlights, no voices, just smoke. But I still turn on the radio once every hour. I still call out sometimes, quietly. just in case someone's listening on the other end. The day began without incident. No bells triggered. No new footprints in the gravel. I made flatbread again, stretching the last bit of flour into 4 thin sheets, rationed for 2 days. I stored them in oiled cloth, kept the burner off to conserve fuel, and made do with cold water and vinegar. It was routine now, habit, keep moving, keep watching. By early afternoon, the wind shifted. Clouds moved in from the north and broke the sunlight. I was on the wall above Gate 9, inspecting the wire tension along the slope when I spotted the first figure running up the path. Not lurching, not broken, just running, hard and desperate. Behind her came 2 more, teenagers by the look of it. One of them carried a backpack, too large for his frame. They were moving fast, and not alone. 6 shapes followed in the distance. Infected, full sprint, their limbs snapping out of rhythm like wind-tossed mannequins. The sound came next, the scrape of shoes on stone, the uneven rhythm of the chase, the panting of someone not ready to die today. They reached Gate 8 just as I reached the pull rope. I didn't think. I dropped the sliding barricade at Gate 10, wedging it low across the entry. I sprinted down the stone corridor and triggered the hot sand from the panel above the inner lintel. A tight pour, just enough to buy seconds. Then I yanked the side door open and reached with the hook. "Through!" I shouted in German, my accent terrible but functional. The woman came first. Blood trailed behind her, but she didn't stumble. She ducked under the panel. I hooked her coat and dragged her through, then turned back. The boy was behind her, too slow. I reached again, caught his pack strap, and pulled with both hands. The third, a girl, came last, barely dodging the grasp of an infected that had skidded on the gravel and slammed into the barricade. I jammed the hook between them, forced the head back with a shove, and she slipped through under the panel before it could swing again. I raised the beam, dropped the full gate, locked it. No second thoughts. The infected slammed against the other side and scraped at the wood, but the weight held. I turned around to face the 3 of them, breathing hard, soaked in cold sweat. The closeness, just feet away from people, panting, bleeding, wild-eyed, was almost too much. I had to grip the wall to stay upright. I hadn't been this close to anyone since the castle emptied. Not this close, not like this. "Stay still," I said, switching back to English. The woman nodded. She understood. The boy dropped his pack and leaned against the wall, gasping. The girl sat on the floor with her arms around her knees and didn't speak. The woman's leg was bleeding, deep. I saw the soaked bandage around her calf, but the blood hadn't soaked through her sock entirely yet. That was good. "What bit you?" I asked. Her answer came slow. "Barbed wire," she said in English, thick accented but clear. "Fence below, not them." I believed her, mostly. Still, I didn't take chances. I led them up to the outer maintenance room I'd cleared days before. I made them stop at the water basin near the outer gate and scrub their hands and faces with vinegar water. It stung their cuts. That was the point. Their outer clothes came off and stayed outside. I gave them old museum hoodies and backup camp pants to wear instead. Every surface they touched was wiped down. When I irrigated the woman's wound, she bit down on leather and didn't scream, even when I poured the iodine. It wasn't clean, but it wasn't human teeth either. The tear had barbed patterns, not punctures. I bandaged it tightly, reinforced with splinting tape. She looked me in the eye when I asked about symptoms. Fever, confusion, tremors. "None," she said, and I believed her. Still, I kept her in observation. I locked the door with them inside and checked every 30 minutes. I told them it wasn't punishment. It was protocol. They didn't argue. I told them the rules. No loud noise, no open lights after dark. Everyone washed. Everyone carried tools, not weapons. No one moved without logging where they were going. The girl, still silent, nodded. The boy just listened. The woman asked my name. I didn't answer. I didn't want the familiarity. Not yet. That evening, the rain came. It started slow, then grew into a steady sheet against the outer walls. I ran to the catchment and secured every container I had. Plastic bins, cooking pots, even the fuel buckets, emptied and cleaned. The sound of water hitting tarp was the first beautiful thing I'd heard in days. Clean water, falling from the sky, no blood in it, no death, just rain. The girl finally spoke when I handed her a bin to hold. "How long?" she asked, not specifying what. I told her the truth. "Don't know. Could be weeks, could be years. Depends how far it spread." She didn't answer, but she didn't cry either. She was old enough to know that was already a luxury. I gave them jobs the next morning. The boy, Milo he said, was quick on his feet, but easily distracted. I put him on fuel duty. His task was to check the generator levels, clean the filters, and track consumption. He liked numbers. I caught him sketching a chart on the wall in pencil, tracking the exact output and time per charge. I let him. It was a good sign. The girl, Anna, became the ration keeper. She wasn't loud, but she was sharp. She wrote everything down in neat rows. Dates, calories, weight. She corrected one of my own estimates without hesitation. I gave her the ledger. That was that. The woman's name was Brigitte, former biology teacher, Austrian Army Reserve, 2 decades older than the kids. She had presence. Not loud, not commanding. Just solid. She didn't ask for a job. She just started one. Watch rotation. She checked the tripwires, tested the gate ropes, reset the caltrops. She reported small things. A loosened knot, a bell too low, the hinge starting to creak. I didn't thank her. She didn't expect it. After 2 days without symptoms, I moved them into the upper sleeping quarters. I unlocked the old volunteer room and cleared space for bedding. We ate flatbread and canned ham in silence, using forks wrapped in cloth to keep them from clinking. I caught Anna reading the labels out loud under her breath, just to hear something familiar. I showed them how to hold a broom handle spear, how to brace against a stone wall and not overextend on a thrust. We didn't call it fighting, we called it procedure. You don't win against them, you survive. The spears were simple, wooden shafts with flat kitchen knives lashed tight and wrapped in cloth to reduce vibration. No sharp points, just flat push and pull. We practiced in the stairwell outside Gate 9. The angle mattered. You push down into the slope, use gravity, never meet force with force. Brigitte picked it up fast. The kids took longer. Milo tried to swing too wide. Anna hesitated on the recoil. I showed them where to stand, when to step back. Let the gate do the work, I said. It's the weapon. You're just the pressure behind it. I didn't tell them what it felt like. The sound of the pole hitting skull. The moment when weight shifts and the body falls. I let them imagine the rest. When the time came, they'd find out for themselves. That night, we sat in the courtyard as the storm passed. The air smelled clean for once. No smoke, no rot, just damp stone and pine. I gave each of them half a boiled potato from the cafe pantry bag I'd set aside for emergencies. It was the best meal we'd had all week. They didn't say much, but I caught them glancing up at the stars. Anna whispered something in German. I didn't ask for a translation. I ran the generator for 20 minutes, just long enough to recharge the battery pack and give us a soft light in the main corridor. Milo leaned against the wall and watched the inverter hum. Anna wrote in the log. Brigitte did a slow walk around the inner gate and then sat by the door, her hand resting on the broom spear like she'd always held it. That night, I reviewed our numbers again. Fuel was low. We had 1 full jerry can of diesel left and maybe 3 hours worth in the maintenance generator tank. Butane was half gone. The food situation was no better. We were down to 6 days of careful rations, and that only worked if nobody got sick or spilled anything. The rainwater was holding, but just barely. The sky had cleared, and stayed that way for 2 days now. If the wind shifted wrong, we'd be drinking grit again. I waited until everyone was asleep, then sat alone near the map. I had drawn every path I knew, stairs, rooms, hidden closets, outer paths, and I kept coming back to the parking lot and the lower ticket office. If anything was going to keep us going for another week, it was there. The problem was getting down without drawing the wrong kind of attention, and getting back without bringing anything with us we didn't plan on. At dawn, we moved. The plan was tight. No voices, no metal. Every surface quieted. We wrapped our boots with strips of cloth for padding, and used cut-up felt from the museum display to make soft soles. Nothing sharp, nothing that clicked. We left behind the polearms and carried only short tools: hook, pry bar, wrench. Not to fight, just to break open locks or pry doors if needed. Anna carried a soft coil of rope. Milo had a stripped-down backpack. No zippers, no jangling straps. Brigitte carried the radio, turned to low band and set to receive only. We stuck to the inner walls on the way down. The wind was strong, pulling up the hillside, carrying our scent and sound away from the valley. It was perfect for movement. The air carried too much dust to smell anything clearly. Even the infected would struggle to follow a trail through this kind of blow. The parking lot was still. 2 cars had been left open, doors swung wide. One was a civil van, the other a family hatchback with a cracked windshield. Nothing moved around them. I scanned for minutes before waving the others down. Milo went straight for the fuel tank. He inserted the siphon hose like I'd taught him, and I took the other end and sucked it carefully until the line ran clear. The first tank gave us half a can. The second was almost full. Inside the old ticket office, we found more than I expected. A locked cabinet had to be pried open with the hook. Inside, a crate of bottled water, 4 sealed boxes of crackers, 3 cans of soup, a bag of powdered milk, and, of all things, 2 brand new fire extinguishers still in their shipping foam. I checked the charge needles. Both were good. A maintenance closet nearby gave us a jerry can, duct tape, a spool of 8mm climbing rope, and an unopened box of AA batteries. Behind the desk, buried under flyers for castle tours and old postcards, we found a pair of cheap PMR radios, still sealed in plastic. I turned one on. It beeped to life. No signal, but power held. I nodded and handed it to Brigitte. I left money on the counter, a full €50 note and some coins. Habit, I guess. The kids didn't understand, but Brigitte watched and didn't comment. We both knew it didn't mean anything anymore, but I still wanted to do it. The wind eased on the way back up, and the path answered with loud, unforgiving crunches. We froze at the 3rd switchback. Something moved at the turnstile below. One man, limping from the opposite trail, blue jacket flapping. He stopped outside gate 8 and looked up, face creased from cold and nights without sleep. Not the slack look of the walking dead. Not yet. His right hand was wrapped in a thick, filthy bandage he held away from his body like it belonged to someone else. He saw us, lifted his chin, and asked for water without raising his voice. Pleading, but controlled. I walked him through the bars the way you talk someone away from a cliff. Asked where the wound came from. He hesitated long enough to answer the question I actually asked. It was fast, he said, eyes slipping off mine. Could have been anything. The wrap gave it away. Layered cloth, pressure set to hide punctures, wrist stiff. I passed a bottle of water and a packet of crackers through the gate with a folded map. East Ridge, higher ground, abandoned cabins that might still hold something. Follow the ridge line, not the road, I said. You'll see red paint on 2 spruces. He nodded, drank, pocketed the food, and left without bargaining. Anna watched me the whole time. Milo muttered that we could have done more. Brigitte stayed with the gate and said nothing. I didn't repeat the rule out loud. We all knew it. No one with a human bite comes inside. We spent the rest of daylight on the inner defenses. Above gate 10 I hung a swing beam, oak salvaged from a broken exhibit platform, on a rope release. One pull and the weight would drop into 2 recessed brackets and dead stop the passage if the knee-high panel failed. Anna timed the drops with me. The first 2 fell clean, the third stuck. We filed the gouges, padded the rope with cloth to stop snagging, and ran it again until it behaved the same way every time. She drew a cleaner version on the wall, better angles, less friction, and I didn't stop her. Short probes came after midnight. 4 infected reached the tripwire and rang the bell near Gate 9. We held our breath, held our places, and let gravity do the work. They lost footing on the slick steps, slid, and staggered away into the trees. Not a siege. Not yet. But morning arrived with a rhythm under the wind. Uneven footfalls, scratches, palms slapping stone. I climbed the western parapet and saw the swell. Dozens, then more, edging up the switchbacks like a flood filling a stairwell, pulled uphill by whatever scraps of noise and scent still meant life. Silence became law. No generator, no banging cookware, no careless gear. We taped every latch and handle, laid foam in the swing beam seat so a panic drop wouldn't squeal, ate cold soup with cloth-wrapped forks. The smell reached us first. Sweat, mud, rot, and the bitter stink of people who no longer care about what lives on their skin. Menthol under the nose dulled the worst of it. I told everyone to breathe through the mouth and watch footing, not faces. We ran the defense in 3 layers. Distance first. Wire baskets loaded with rubble perched on short ramps above the second switchback. 1 push and a rock curtain poured down, breaking legs and rhythm without pulling us into the mess. We stuffed cotton in our ears before each run. Stone on stone inside stone hurts in ways you remember for days. At the choke, the knee-high sliding panel dropped. Caltrops rolled forward under shuffling feet. The mouth of Gate 10 narrowed to 1 body wide. Hook, push, 2 steps back, switch. No lunges, no overreach, no heroics. The 3rd layer was ugly but effective. Lime wash cut with water through the hinged slot above the lintel. It didn't burn like heat. It blinded and turned throats raw, made them recoil, fall, or stall long enough for the gate to do the rest. We pulled scarves over nose and mouth before each pour and kept eyes slit. By mid-afternoon the path sounded like a broken drumline. We rolled 2 baskets, then another, then held until the swell clotted against itself. 1 heavy one shouldered through the chaos and hit Anna square on. Her plywood shield held, but her wrist did not. I taped it tight and packed it cold. She swallowed the pain and moved off the line without argument. From then on, she became our runner, resetting bell lines, checking caltrops, logging water and fuel. Milo stood in close, learned to sweep the hook early and low, never fighting mass with mass. Brigitte ran the slot like she'd been doing it all her life. At dusk, the slope was littered with broken bodies, and the kind of quiet you only get when force runs out of nerve. We hadn't needed to crush skulls. Control held. So did we. Cleaning was its own battle. We dug a dry trench latrine downwind and dusted it with lime each day. No exceptions. Vinegar water first, then soap, then dry cloth. Clothes quarantined. Bad ones burned in a drum below the parapet. Oil-soaked cloth hung across low arches to hold back the stink. Milo added mint and dried peel from the food stores, and for reasons I didn't question, it helped a little. A broken voice rasped through the radio for 10 minutes, French or Belgian, warning of red zones and nothing else. We slept in shifts. I took first watch, hook across my knees, crowbar at the wall, eyes on the slit. Bodies below didn't move. I checked anyway. Fatigue breeds errors. By noon the next day, our hands performed tasks before our heads remembered why. The south stairs bell line looked fine at a glance. A knot had loosened and the bell had swung into stone, silent. We walked past it. Later, sound came from the wrong direction. A low groan that didn't bounce the way outside does. We missed it. My shout snapped the room tight. Brigitte lifted her spear. Milo froze. Anna dropped the ledger and reached for the radio. The first infected rounded Gate 9 bend and brought 5 more with it. Too close for the hook, too late for the panel. We had planned for this kind of worst. I grabbed the extinguisher and the bar. Brigitte and I pulled up cloth masks in the same motion. The blast of powder filled the corridor, stole the smell, blinded everything that wanted the scent of us. I swung low, not to crush, to topple. Knees and shins don't argue with a steel bar. Bodies folded sideways into dust. I pinned one with my boot and levered it down until the fight went out of the limbs. Brigitte slid past me and ended the next 2 cleanly and without noise. She turned away from the kids so they wouldn't see her wipe her face. Milo shoved with the shield. driving bodies back into the haze and toward the stairs. Anna stayed off the line. Her sprained wrist didn't need heroics, and we didn't need mistakes. The last one went over the inner edge with a crash that ran down the hill, and didn't come back, and we worked in silence after. Corpses to the outer terrace, tarps over faces, rocks on corners. Then we fixed what failed. Gate 9 got redundancy, wedges set in opposite bite, a crossbar seated into fresh sockets, and a rope snare on the latch so it couldn't lift without 2 independent actions. I chalked a door checklist where nobody could miss it. Bell line set, wedges in, beam armed, panel up, caltrops retrieved, and made each of us read it aloud before leaving any threshold. It felt childish. We did it anyway. Nerves settle when ritual takes over. Rations dipped below what you give to hikers on a bad day. We stretched everything, crackers thinned into broth, ham boiled until only the thought of it remained, flatbread baked so lean it snapped. My portion stayed smallest by math, not virtue. I put a second foraging run on paper with arrows and backups, and would only pull it if the valley loosened. If not, we'd wait and try not to lose weight too fast. That night the slit window kept pulling my eyes. The checklist glowed in lantern smear like a warning centuries older than my chalk. Somewhere between that and the ache in my hands, a rotor beat rolled in from the west and skimmed the hillside. The helicopter's spotlight washed the forest edge and moved on like it didn't want to find work. The radio found a voice around a 700 kHz band. Civil defense scripted and drained. Regional quarantine, remain indoors. Aid after containment. The chopper didn't circle back. No lines, no flares, no directions. A pass and a check mark. Morning counted fewer infected on the lower terraces. Maybe 25, maybe a few more. And the wind carried the rattle of our clatter rigs down the wrong switchback all night. It was the thinnest the hillside had felt in days. That's the kind of thin you use. We spread the map on the chapel altar and weighted the corners with tools. There was a maintenance fire road across the blind side, a narrow slope trail I'd walked in the first week, and a farmhouse ruin with a dry cistern, a good cellar, and an attic hatch that barred from the inside. 3 or 4 kilometers, mostly contouring. No power lines, no villages, fewer sounds to wake the valley. We'd leave at dark. Not full moon dark, just clean bright moonlight and clear air. Diversions first. I hauled scrap wire, cans, and a wind vane up the bell tower and rigged 3 noisemakers pointed at the south switchback, where the infected tended to puddle. A gust would spin them and chatter metal, enough to pull the curious downhill while we slipped away on the far side. I seeded caltrops on stairs we wouldn't use and made a note to sweep them if we failed and returned. For the drop itself, we didn't trust the old tour line alone. We doubled 2 ropes, backed them with the 8mm coil from the ticket office, tied redundant anchors to the bell tower's stone rib, and bounce tested with body weight until I believed it. Harnesses were seat knots and webbing, ugly but load-bearing. We practiced inside on a low beam until Milo ran clean. Before we left, I gathered the notes I'd never intended anyone to read. Castle diagrams, breach logs, ration math, checklists, the day-by-day that turned into survival doctrine, and sealed them with a second copy of the map in a waterproof bag under the chapel statue, wrapped in linen. I left a 1-line instruction on the cover. If you find this, the castle still works. If you work like it demands. Dusk scraped the color off the hill. The wind vane clatter in the south stair woke soft groans in the wrong direction. We didn't hurry. Hurry makes noise. I went first over the southern drop. Crowbar looped through my belt, hook strapped to my back. The doubled ropes bit into the gloves and lowered me clean to the rock shelf. No movement in the pines, only wind-moving needles. I blinked the lamp. Once, pause, twice. Anna came next, then Brigitte, then Milo, quiet and shaking, but steady. We hauled the ropes up and ghosted the ridge single file, hugging rock and shadow. Below, a straggle of undead paced the road with their chins tilted at noise the wind threw down the wrong way. A burned cabin reeked enough to turn the stomach. We wrapped cloth across faces and kept going. The farmhouse ruin held together better than I remembered. Stone walls solid, cellar latch rusted but set, attic hatch that barred inside with a steel rod forgotten by someone luckier. The cistern was dry but intact, gutters salvageable, enough to rig a tarp catchment if rain bothered to visit. We barred the hatch and listened, just breeze and wood creak and the quiet of people pretending to sleep. Anna curled into her bag and was gone in seconds. Milo fell asleep, boots on. Brigitte stared at the boards until thought left her eyes. I turned on the old recorder I'd been carrying since the first day because saying it out loud made it true. If someone hears this, we're out. 4 of us made it off Hochostowitz after 10 days. The place held because we treated it like a machine, not a memory. Gates, gravity, silence, checklists. I'm not brave. I stayed sick enough to be careful and methodical enough to be boring. That's what kept us breathing. I paused and listened to the wind moving dust through rafters. Medieval defenses aren't a costume. They're instructions. If you follow them, you trade heroics for time. If you can live with that, you can live. I clicked the recorder off and set it by the hatch in case I needed to speak into it again. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to like and subscribe to keep the stories alive. For now, stay quiet, stay vigilant, and stay alive. Jack's Nightmares, signing off. Until next time, survivor.